the aging you want tomorrow begins with, really the choices you make today. The loss of independence that start at 80. Well, it didn't start at 80, it started at 30. The Alzheimer's that comes on at 70 didn't start at 70. It really started at 40 with the lifestyle habits and so forth. The heart attack at 50 started when you were 25.
This is the Home of Healthspan podcast, where we profile health and wellness role models, sharing their stories and the tools, practices, and routines they use to live a lively life.
Jaime, it is an honor and a privilege to have you today on the Home of Healthspan. I can't wait to share what you're up to with our listeners. But before we jump in to your background, everything you're currently doing, how would you describe yourself?
Well, Andrew, thanks for having me. I will tell you this, I'm certainly a lively health educator. I've been doing this for 40 plus years. And it's funny, my enthusiasm hasn't wavered in those 40 years. And my enthusiasm is unparalleled. And I believe that, to me, I was put on this earth for a purpose, and that was it. And to influence people with their health through proper nutrition, mild forms of exercise, and do it in a way that changes lives one body at a time. And I've been blessed with this. And I have to tell you, it's been very gratifying, but I love the spirit of a lively. I mean, that's what it's all about. And helping millions of people. And we've done it. And it doesn't matter if it's one or a million, Andrew, it's still the same.
Yeah. It's won millions of times, basically. And you really have done it consistently for decades. I think a lot of listeners would recognize you from the 8-minute abs, but we said when we started, right? Most listeners know we work through the 5 pillars and kind of cover what you do. And we assumed we would start with fitness, but so much of what you just talked about was about your purpose and what drives and the connection with your clients and the people you impact. So I'd actually love to start there because that's often where we end, but that's where you started. And I think it's so important, especially as we age, especially as we're entering a period of loneliness, of people staying on social media versus socializing. Can you talk a little bit about how maybe your thoughts around that have shifted over the years?
Well, I can tell you, when you start off at 25, your ideals are one thing. When now I'm 64. And so I've seen the shift of, basically trying now to say, okay, we want to lessen the gap between our lifespan and our health span. And there's certain avenues that you have to take. And, to me, if you don't make time for your wellness, you're going to be forced to make time for your illness. And so there's definitely steps. And I to me, without more important than anything, it's routine, Andrew. It's routine over motivation. And I see that in everyday lives. I believe in rituals. I believe in rituals. I do a ritual every single morning. I do my push-ups, my plank, and my squats. I do 25 squats every day. And it doesn't sound like a lot, but that's, it's 750 for the month. I do a minute worth of planks, which for your abs, you give a slimmer, trimmer, tighter waistline. I do, again, if you do 1 minute, think about that's 30 minutes throughout the course of a month. And then I do 50 push-ups. Okay. So you multiply that out, it's 1,500 push-ups. So I believe in these smaller steps, these daily victories. And it doesn't have to be just nutrition or fitness oriented. It could be the thoughts. At first it has to come from here. And so I see that. And then when I see, even in friends that I have who have isolated themselves away from people that maybe we were going through high school with and college, and all of a sudden they're doing their own thing. And I see that they're not as happy because you need that interaction. And if you don't, I'd say you better get to it now because it's not too late. It's never too late to do this. And, to me, people don't stop exercising because they grow old. They grow old because they stop exercising. And I think that's a real important thing because I believe in movement. It doesn't have to be formal exercise. As you know, Andrew, living down there, I just want them to move. And there's a thing that we did. In fact, I brought this up only because if you want to live, move. That was a title by Jack LaLanne. And we do everything in the spirit of Jack LaLanne. And I wrote this with his lovely wife, who is 99, Andrew, 99. God bless her, Elaine LaLanne. And it was the thing was, there was Jack's title, If You Want to Live, Move, putting the boom back to boomers. But it was based on the philosophy of Jack LaLanne. And Jack was all about, obviously, it was about fitness, but nutrition, but it was the spirit of his essence of trying to teach people the right way to have a healthy lifestyle. And again, it didn't just mean more, bicep curls or eating a carrot stick, a celery stick. He wanted to have that healthy lifestyle mentality for people and not a diet mentality.
Yeah.
And so I look at people and I look at, friends and family and associates. I said, you know what? You want to get lean, if that's your goal and objective, go follow a lean person around. It comes down to their habits. It's cooking and eating and shopping and fitness. But more importantly, it's thinking habits. They think like a lean person. They don't have this diet mentality where you have to have an all or nothing mentality. That's not what this is about. It's real. I always said I want to do a program for real people who have real jobs, real schedules, real families, real homes, but they still want real results. So you have to do something that's always baseline doable. It's funny. That's how we actually did the whole idea of 8-minute abs, because Andrew, that was 1994. And then we released it in 95. It's 30 years ago. But it was the idea that, everybody, Richard Simmons and Jane Fonda were doing an hour program, right? But we're still having people, probably 95% of the population was doing nothing at all. And, time was the biggest factor. And we said, well, geez, let's do something that doesn't take a lot of time, but then gets into the idea that it was the hook. Because we didn't say, do just 8 minutes. There's 1,440 minutes in a day. Let's start you off with 8. If you have more time, do 16, 24, 32. But you had to get these couch potatoes doing something. And that's how we got them to get active. And that was the thing that really, I think, catapulted us from this time-oriented aspect of programming. And I think it worked because, there's a lot of people that did it.
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to come back to that because you started about your routine when you start the day, right? That it sounds very light, but it compounds over time. And I think back to a couple of our guests, Dr. Torkel, who wrote The Pulse Cure. He described that the extended life expectancy from 90th percentile VO2 max versus 50th is marginal, but 50th versus 10th percentile is 10x, right? Like it's a massive difference. And so a lot of people have this mindset, or JJ Virgin, same with the idea of these exercise snacks.
Yes.
And the benefit of doing just 10 minutes of vigorous movement a day reduces all-cause mortality by 50%. Right? Just 10 minutes. So is it as good as 60 minutes? Maybe not, but that extra 50 minutes is not nearly as impactful as that first 10. And so I love how you're positioning it of it's not what the best case is, it's do something. And what is that something for you? So it sounds like, I can start the day. I know I've gotten my squats, my push-ups, my plank in. I have a great baseline. Whatever comes from here, it's gravy. I'm good here. And so how do you help people find out what that is for them? Because they may come at different points, right? They may have just had a surgery. They can't really do squats or get down and plank. So how do you help people figure out what is my baseline that gets me for the day?
Well, it's a great point. And I have to tell you, you talk about, people, I think what happens is with motivation and stuff, I think because they're bombarded with such information out there, it's overload. It is absolute overload.
Yeah.
And so they don't know where to start. And I just said, we start just moving. Okay. But, when we said 8 minutes, it's not just any 8 minutes, more is not better. Better is better. I tell people this, especially as we age, there's something that happens to your body. It's called sarcopenia, where you lose muscle tissue. It's muscle leaking. That's completely opposite of what we want. And so when I tell people that, especially women, you start losing muscle tissue rapidly, after the age of 30, you lose 3 to 5% per decade. Well, that adds up very quickly when you start to get in your 60s. And so, that same amount of calories that are coming in for a female, they're wondering, well, how come I'm getting a little more lumpier and bumpier in certain areas? Well, your metabolism has dropped because your muscle tissue is decreased. And so it's like, okay, let's rev up that metabolism again. Let's put on lean muscle. I think what people think, well, you got to spend 2 hours a day in a gym, or you got to, again, you don't have to do that. You can use your own body's resistance. You can have bands. You can do whatever it is to put an overload to your system. But just start off at a little bit, like you said, snack size. JJ Virgin, she's great. It's that snack size version. Well, it's the same idea as the 8-minute program that we did, but it was the idea of how do you implement that? And that morning ritual that I do, you're right, it's more psychological than physical. Physical is nothing, but it catapults me into a healthy regime right off the bat. Right off the bat, I start because I know I've done something good for me. So psychologically and spiritually, that makes sense to me because I don't care how bad the day can get. I know I'm doing something good for me. And it didn't take a lot of time to get me into that mind space. And that's what you want. The aging you want tomorrow begins with, really the choices you make today, Andrew. And I'll tell people this, the loss of independence that start at 80. Well, it didn't start at 80. It started at 30. The Alzheimer's that comes on at 70 didn't start at 70. It really started at 40 with the lifestyle habits and so forth. The heart attack at 50 started when you were 25. So it's this idea that, you've got to implement a lifestyle that's doable, number one, and based on your goals and objectives, of course. Now, I don't deal with a lot of people who are into marathon running or bodybuilding. I deal with people that are everyday people that want to live longer, look younger, and feel better, especially boomers, because those are the 3 elements we want and need and desire. I can tell you this, if you tell people who are sitting on the couch and all of a sudden you tell them, well, you got to move an hour a day, it's not going to happen. It would have happened by now. So just that alone. So the idea of mentally placing that can-do spirit into somebody, it's empowering. It empowers them. And that's where you get them started. And then the light bulb goes off in their head and said, I can do this. Even though I'm in a wheelchair, I can do upper body movement. I'm getting stronger. I feel better. And like I said, so important, the empowerment aspect to this. And that's sort of a page book right out of Jack LaLanne's philosophy. And Jack LaLanne, Andrew, as you know, was the godfather of fitness, but he had that delivery. People related to him, that connectivity he had with his audience for 33 years on TV was that he was the voice of reason. He wasn't over on one side or on the other with his, with the idea of cockamamie, fads. It was straight down the middle, but he just meant consistency beats intensity any day of the week. Get out there and move, start something, okay? You're going to feel better. You're going to look better. And that's what this is about. But again, routine over motivation wins every single time. And that's where I think we've, kind of positioned ourselves, especially with the boomers.
Yeah. And I mean, it makes a lot of sense because it is consistency that leads to long-term transformation. It's not 1 week of intensity that falls off. So dialing it in, that overload for one person may be 10 chair squats is where they start because, they have bad knees. They have to come up for it. That you brought up a couple of things that I do want to flag for our listeners, right? That sarcopenia over time and the 3% by decade muscle loss. I believe the recent research was showing that is not destiny. Like it's actually associated with lack of movement. And so we lose it because we're not using it. And back to the book, you have to move your body. These chairs are relatively recent in human existence, right? Most of humans never had a chair. If you go back 250, you were moving, you had to squat, you were moving your body. We didn't have desks. We were out doing things. You talk about vitamin D, we were out in the sun. This was how we lived.
Correct.
And the idea that, and you probably saw this new book, Super Agers, where they went and they tried it. They assumed it was going to be genes and they couldn't find any genes for all this. It was all habits, all things completely in our control. And so these small pieces, it's not about being the marathon runner or the Ironman or whatever. It's about continuing to move, make good decisions, have that consistency. So, moving the body's how you don't lose it, right? Move it so you don't lose it because we're mobile creatures. At the same time, I think maybe not everyone realizes on the nutrition side what it takes. You go have a Frappuccino, maybe 375 calories, and what it would take to just go burn off those 375, not to mention all the other calories you eat during the day. So, the old adage, you lose ounces in the gym and pounds in the kitchen. How do you help people think through how they fuel their body, their nutrition?
Well, I can tell you this, because people would ask me, I say, well, hey, you're 64 years old, but I've never been overweight. I've never had an obesity problem. Knock on wood, I've been very healthy, but I've studied it. It was things that then I've implemented it. And I always tell people, they say, well, what kind of diet are you on? I say, I'm not really on a diet. I'm half Italian. I can tell you this. I eat Mediterranean diet because it makes sense to me. But the idea of eating clean, lean, and green, Andrew, I tell people, look, limit the empty calories, the sugar. The average person gets 22 teaspoons of sugar a day, which is like 300 some calories. And you can't out-train a poor diet any way you slice it. So you really got to be mindful of that. And of course, the inflammation, and I call it inflammaging, especially when you get older with sugar, what it does to your body. So you really have to think about that and fried foods and so forth. But eating clean, lean is lean protein. You need to have protein, especially as we age. And we'll talk about that in a second. And the other one is green. I like to always have words that alliterate because it's easy for people to remember. So again, clean, lean, and green. Green is vegetables. So produce and protein is where you want to be without a question. Limit the empty calories. But the idea of protein, and especially as we age, because it's so important to have that, protein synthesis and so forth. So people say, well, how much protein, should I eat? Because that's always a factor. They get all these, crazy, numbers thrown at them. But I always say, look, I always go to a dietitian for all this information. They say, all right, well, listen, you want to be anywhere between 0.75 and 1 gram per body weight. That's kind of a fair number. Okay. So what if you're a 120 pound person? That means you need 90 to 120 grams of protein a day. If you're a 150 pound person, it's 112 to 150. If you're a 200 pound person, it's 150 to 200 grams a day. Andrew, you and I both know, listen, if you're 150 pounds, to get 150 grams of protein, that's a lot of chicken breast. Since chicken breast is, 3 ounces, 25 grams. So there you have to do something where you have to start thinking, all right, how do I do this for breakfast? And you've got to have some protein, whether it's, you can have 25, 30 grams of protein every meal, and you'll probably get close to your goals.
Yeah.
But you got to be mindful of that. Otherwise, it's not going to happen. And so, again, what does protein do? It increases satiety or the feeling of fullness. We want that because you're tricking your body, because otherwise, if you get hungry, if you eat carbs all day long, okay, and especially simple carbs, well, guess what? Your sugar level is going to go up. It is going to crash down. You don't feel good. But you need the protein to even you out, number one. But it's just, again, to fuel your body, don't fool your body, okay? And it's so important to understand, macronutrients, but not to the point where you got to start figuring out on a calculator. 3 to 4 ounces fits in the palm of your hand. That's portion control. So think about that. There's 3 to 4 ounces. You want beef? That's fine. But that's about 27 grams of protein right there in 3 ounces. A deck of cards or a bar of soap is 3 ounces. So you gotta eat mindfully to get that in.
Speaking of the mindfully, there's certainly in a country where our obesity rates are over 40%.
It's crazy.
It's based more on lean mass or your ideal body weight, right? So if you're 340 pounds, you're not targeting 300 to 340 pounds of protein. It's saying, hey, my target weight is actually 215. That's probably my protein goal, right?
That is absolutely correct, because you got it. Because if you're 300 pounds, you got to be chugging down a lot of muscle milk or something, because you aren't getting 300 grams of protein in a day. It's not going to happen. But yeah, that's a way for somebody to actually look at that and go, okay, even because somebody says, well, shoot, how many calories should I be having, per day? So I follow the dietitian's rule on that as well. And this is good for your listeners. They basically say you want your goal weight times 12 to get your calories. So for instance, let's say if you're a 150 pound person, you want to be a 125 pounds person, right? So you want to lose 25 pounds. We go 125 times 12 and you get 1,500 calories for the day. That gives you kind of a baseline. So if your listeners out there, let's say if they're 175 pounds, they want to go down to 150. That's great. Okay. So it's think about it, 150 times 12, do the math. It's about 1,800 calories a day. Now, if you're a 250 pound person, you want to go down to 200, it's 200 times 12 or 2,400 calories a day. Now that gets a little more, especially if you're counting macros, it gets a little more realistic. And therefore, you want to focus in on those. But those are just baseline numbers that a dietitian gives you, depending on your activity level. If you're an athlete, they always want you at 1 gram of protein, per body weight. But, some people are not athletes, they're sedentary. So you got to be mindful of that. And depending on your goals, your objectives, but there's a purpose to all this. And I think the idea is, if you don't do something, what do you think's going to happen? Yeah. If you do nothing at all for the rest of your life, what do you think's going to happen? There's heart disease, there's diabetes, there's, high blood pressure, cholesterol, you name it, forms of cancer, dementia that happens. So you have to do something, but make it realistic towards your goals, and you'll hit it. But not doing anything is non-negotiable. You have to do it.
Yeah, I mean, I think there are two things, right? There's the, hey, I'm fine today, and I'm just mortgaging my future and my future self. But I do think the fine today, in my experience, the people we work with, we see, oh, I'm fine. We start helping them in the smallest things. I say, wow, wait, I can wake up feeling like this? So they thought they were fine because the fish doesn't know the water it's swimming in. It just knows this is the baseline. This is what normal's like. But they don't realize normal is not living a life of health and energy and vibrancy. And when you turn that on, it's like the Wizard of Oz turning on Technicolor, right? All of a sudden, whoa, this is what's possible?
You're not in Kansas anymore.
Yeah, exactly. And so do you see that? Obviously, people come to you for a reason. Like they have some trigger and maybe they think, hey, I'm just investing in the future. But do you hear that from them as well? It's like, hey, I thought I was doing this for 10 years from now, but wow. I mean, I'm feeling and seeing the difference today, and it's huge.
Oh, without a doubt. And I think, the fact is, we know physiologically, if you start eating better, if you start drinking more water, if you get more sleep, you're going to automatically feel better. And of course, just moving alone, your body's meant to move. And so obviously, we're not sharing this crazy information that's hidden secrets. It's out there, and it's just about implementing it. And that's where I think, we have to really keep, honing in on that. And because getting fit never gets old. Trust me, it doesn't. And the old Jack LaLanne line, was if you rest, you rust. And I believe that. And especially as you age, but you start now. Don't wait till you're 50 and 60 to start. Do it now. I mean, that's where I think people have to be. And don't think you have to be, have to go out and immediately run a marathon. Go 5 minutes down the street, get the mail, come back, do it again. I mean, it's just that, again, it's that routine that builds and builds. I call it daily victories. You're not going to come down and constantly, eat healthy most of the time. But the thing is, an 80-20 rule, that works. I always tell people, look at your plate every single day. And you look and say, is this going to get me closer to my goal or further away? And if you can honestly say 8 out of 10 times you're getting closer to your goal, you're going to win, especially at losing. You're going to win at losing if you do it that way. And that relieves the idea of being the perfection mode, right? It's progress. Because if somebody says you can't have a piece of chocolate cake anymore, you can't have a piece of bread. What's the first thing a person wants? They want chocolate cake, and don't let me stop. Don't let me stop at one piece. Let me have two. You have the bread. You don't have to have a whole loaf. Have the bread, enjoy it, and move on. And you don't have to be perfect every day. We were just talking about earlier about the idea of sugar. I tell people in my seminars, this is a great analogy for people to understand. So Snickers bars is 260 calories, right? For big Snickers bars. So some days, you have an emotional day of eating, right? And people go through that, bad day at work, bad day, whatever, they start eating. Okay. Now, let's say you have a really bad day and you have 10 Snickers bars, right? Well, you and I both know, Andrew, that 3,500 calories equals 1 pound of fat. Okay. So you have 10 Snickers bars and it's, my gosh, you go 260 calories times 10, it's 2,600 calories. That's kind of a blowout for one afternoon. But I've got to tell you, what happens is in the big scheme of things, okay, so it was one bad day. You pick it up the next meal, the next day. But what happens mentally, Oh my gosh, I can't believe it. I blew it. I can't believe I ate 10 Snickers bars. What's wrong with me? Don't beat yourself up. You're going to have those so what days. Pick it up. The next meal, the next day, the next week. That's how you win long term. But it's the idea, is the mindset shifted. And the other thing, real quick, I always do in my seminar, I say, you know what? You've got to, if it's a diet mentality, just do the edit, EDIT. So think of food that way, because everything with a diet is, I can't eat this, I can't eat that. You got to eat less of this, less of that. I want you to focus on edit, meaning more fruits, more vegetables, more whole grains, more healthy oils, more lean proteins, more water, more fitness, more sleep. That idea shifts. Okay. It's more. He didn't tell me I got to eat less. I'm eating more. So that kind of thinking propels people to succeed long term.
And this is what I try to explain to people too, right? Back to if you're doing a gram per pound of body weight of protein, right? You're getting in these lean, good proteins that you enjoy. Find the ones you like. If you don't like salmon, eat chicken. If you don't like chicken, go to beef. Like find what you like. Exactly. And then if you're doing 800 grams of fresh plants, you're just not going to be that hungry for other things. And you're going to have your baseline of nutrients. So then you don't feel bad. It's like, hey, I want a Snickers bar. Cool, great. You did all this. You're probably not going to want 10 of them because you're going to be pretty full. You might just have the one. Yeah.
Isn't that amazing? You're tricking your body and it works. And then you start feeling better because you start looking here and go, shoot, man, I'm looking pretty good here.
Well, you have more energy, right? You don't get the crashes because you're fueling with what our body, most of these things, when you talk about empty calories, humans never evolved to get that. We've created these things in labs. If you go back to plants and animals, this is what our bodies evolved to process, digest, and get our energy from the sun passing through. Like that's the source of all our energy. You brought up a couple times getting more sleep. So, how do you prioritize sleep? How do you structure it? What is your sleep routine?
I will tell you this, and I'm probably guilty of it because I go to bed probably around 11. But I get up at 5 every morning, start the day off right, boom. I probably don't get enough sleep, but I can tell you I've learned to live on that. But now that I've researched more and more, sleep it aids in recovery. And so, you need it. You need it. And I don't care if you're 20 or 70, you need more sleep. And so I think from a standpoint of what gives you better sleep, there's things that say, you don't drink water before you go to bed or alcohol, or you don't eat 3 hours before you go to bed. There's all these different things that have the room cool, have it dark. The bottom line is, to me, if I get enough activity during the day, guess what? I don't care where I am. I'm going to sleep. I'm off to the never land because your body says, okay, I've had enough. I need to recuperate. I need to slow down. And then boom, I'm done. And so to me, fitness and movement is the elixir. And that's what you need to help you age correctly. And if you don't have those pillars that you were talking about, if even one or two of them are out, you're not going to be as healthy as you want. So again, what are we trying to do? We're trying to decrease the gap between our lifespan and our health span. You want to be as healthy as you can for as long as you can. And if you cut things out that are important, like nutrition and fitness and sleep and so forth, and mindset, and also the idea of, this connection you have with people, something's going to drop and you don't need it. So you got to try to fit most of those things in on a daily basis. Make it a routine.
Yeah, for sure. And so speaking of the routine, one thing that's kind of permeated all the pieces we talked about is this mindset. So you talked about when you start in the morning, yes, it's about moving your body and the physical side, but it's as much about the mental side. Hey, I've gotten this in. I am moving my body. I've triggered these.
Yep.
I think a lot of people understand you can't eat healthy for a week and then just go fried foods and junk the rest of your life, or go to the gym for a week and sit on your butt the rest of the time. But for some reason, it seems like a lot of times with mindset, we say, oh, well, I read this book, so I'm good. Or I went to this seminar, so I'm good. And don't realize the ongoing work that mental health requires as well. So how do you work with clients to get that mindset of not, hey, I can't have this, but here's what I am getting. Here's what I can do. Here's what I'm excited about. What does that look like?
Well, I think the idea is you just look at it from a realistic standpoint. I always tell people, it's the if you notice, if you go from like Thanksgiving to New Year's, Andrew, those 6 weeks, everybody's, oh my gosh, I gotta get ready for the holidays, this, that. And I said, New Year's is coming up. I understand that, but I don't care what you do in those 6 weeks. It's what I want you to do is from New Year's to Thanksgiving. It's those months I want to know what you're doing. So you have to look at it and go, all right, it's a realistic approach. And the idea of people that think, again, all or nothing thinking is that I have to go out and I got to just do everything so perfect or it's not going to work. And I don't believe that. I believe that, again, you follow the 80-20 rule in almost everything and you're going to succeed. And so when I have clients, and actually I still have personal training clients that I've had for, 12, 15 years that still come to see me, they've heard this mantra over and over and they've succeeded because of that. And there's going to be days where they're not going to be as healthy as they want. And then what they say, it's a so what day, Jamie. I just had a so what day. And they go right into the next meal or the next day with a healthier attitude about food or about movement or about sleep or about, did I get enough water today? Well, maybe you were on vacation. So it was less realistic to get in all your water because you're moving. It's okay. It's all right. And so it's the idea of the perfection mindset has to be resolved. And once they have that, everything else can be implemented. Because we have people say, well, I don't have time to exercise. Don't you? Let's look at that. There's 1,440 minutes a day. I want you to get a piece of paper, and your listeners can do this, and split. When you say you don't have time, split your day into thirds on a piece of paper. From breakfast to lunch, okay, I want to know what you're doing. From lunch to dinner, write down what your daily routine is. And then from dinner to bedtime. And if you're telling me you don't have 8, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 20 minutes to get your movement in, well, then you have to prioritize something else because there's a lot of minutes in the day that you could fit in. And it's just not about, I don't have time. You got to make the time. And then don't cancel on yourself. I mean, Andrew, think about it. Most of these people who go to the doctors, they never cancel on their doctor. They don't cancel their dentist appointment. Circle that program on your calendar. That's your time. Nobody gets it.
It's on my calendar. Here's when I'm going to the gym or here's when I'm swimming. It is protected time.
It is protected time. Nobody gets it. You're going to benefit by it immensely and you deserve it. Why? Yeah. You didn't cancel out the doctor. Don't cancel yourself.
Yeah. I mean, the other piece on that, I think is one, sometimes we give it to other people that we know, right? They call or you do a meeting, but a lot of the times we're giving it to Reed Hastings and Netflix, or we're giving it to Mark Zuckerberg and Instagram, right? And so I think once you do that kind of audit, you can also see, ooh, is this really where I want to spend my life? Is that the life I want to live? And do I want to reallocate that time to something that's going to make me feel better?
Without a doubt. And that's, I think that's real life. And I just think that it has to be a shift. It's a renewal shift in their mind. And because they're, again, when you look at the internet and you look at all the gurus out there and they're telling you, you got to do this for 6 weeks or this for 8 weeks. Well, you know what? Life doesn't work that way. There's a lot of months in there. So, don't do things that to me, one of the clients just, said, well, I can follow this for 6 weeks. I'm like, well, 6 weeks is nothing. It's, so the idea is you got to think about that when you start a program and say, well, can I eat like this for, everybody can do that for 30 days. Can I eat like this for 30 years? Well, then you got something. So, yeah. So don't cut out food groups, people. Don't do it.
No. And Jamie, I think that's a beautiful place to close because I think we live in a world of influencers that may have been around for 4 months or 4 weeks or 4 years even. And no one knows the long-term impact of what they're recommending and kind of these fads and fly by night. Whereas you've literally been doing this for 4 decades and delivering impact, and the results are real. And anybody following you, looking at the comments, I mean, one of the first comments on one of your YouTube videos I saw was like, I've been following this beautiful man for 30 years, right? Like the people have been with you on this journey for decades and seeing real results. And so I really implore our listeners to check out more of Jamie's work. Thank you, Jamie, for all you've been doing and continue to do to help so many people live healthier longer.
It's a pleasure. And, the old saying is, I always have a saying, it's, I will not let age change me. I'll change the way I age. And that's so true. So get up, fuel up, and live it out there, guys. So listen to Andrew. He's right on.
Fantastic. Thanks, Jamie.
Thank you for joining us on today's episode of the Home of Healthspan podcast. And remember, you can always find the products, practices, and routines mentioned by today's guests, as well as many other Healthspan role models on alively.com. Enjoy a lively day.